Chapter 1. Dane, capital of Drayden. Round 2306. 12th pass. Blue eyes, dark black hair. Kiri sat motionless in the very centre of the floor of the practice hall. She sat cross-legged with her arms folded, a book open in front of her. Placed just before her was a cup of water. She was concentrating on it, her gaze unmoving, her body still and controlled. A spell passed, and still she didn't move. Finally she let out a sigh of frustration, and reached forward to pick up the cup. No change. Still cool. Why can't I do this? She drank a little water and then put the cup back down, picking up the book and studying its contents. It was old and time-worn, with a cover that was in danger of coming loose. The sixth element. The forbidden book, so she'd been told by her original mentor. Charis had kept it a secret from her, with good reason. Kiri now knew her gifts were beyond those considered normal for even the powerful priestesses of Dane. She was chosen for greatness by Lacaille herself, goddess of all. The book described how those with such special powers should use them for good and for ill, for domination, for control, and for causing pain and death. Kiri could see Charis in her mind's eye, gently remonstrating with her, as had been her manner. Don't meet violence with violence. Charis had lived by those words. Kiri had held her in her arms as she died by them. Charis had been killed by the men of Scalia during supposedly peaceful negotiations between the two powers, a mission to seek a way of working out their differences and carry out a quest to seek more gifted women in the lands. Just a mere few stretches ago. It seems like a lifetime. Kiri had been just an acolyte, not even a full priestess. Charis had forbidden her to use her powers to determine the men's motives. It had been a fatal mistake. They had been ambushed, overwhelmed. At close range their abilities were no match for the crude yet powerful weapons of the men of Scalia. Death, fire and blood had followed. Out of 4 precious women who ventured forth, only Kiri survived to tell the tale. I will not make that mistake again. I will use whatever I have to gain whatever advantage I can. Kiri trembled at the memory. There had been pain amidst the carnage. She idly looked down at her left hand. She wore a thin black felt glove over it most of the time. But alone with just herself for company, she left it open to the air. It no longer bled, but it still hurt like fury. The healers had done their best, but the scar was stark and ugly. Angry, torn skin marked the back of her hand. She turned it over. A similar disfiguration marked her palm. It would be a pass or 2 before the stitches could be removed. A crossbow bolt, straight through. Even thinking about it made her wince. She could move her hand well enough, though occasionally it would ache and remind her of what had happened. And my vow to one Torrin of Scalia. Torrin was a prince of Scalia. He had received the priestesses when they had come to discuss the provisions of the treaty between Drayden and Scalia in the border town of Varda. The priestesses had come with peaceful intentions despite many reservations. Initially it seemed the Scalians had the same approach. Only Torrin burnt the treaty before them, and then slaughtered Kiri's companions. He'd underestimated her, though. She'd almost caught him, and one of his guards had felt her immediate wrath. Kiri had killed the guard, brutally, gruesomely. She licked her lips. It had been satisfying, but the burning embers of vengeance were still smouldering within her. Torrin will pay. I will not let men take advantage. Strike hard, strike first. They will have good reason to fear the priestesses now. I will make sure of that. There would be no mercy. Mercy was for the weak. He would pay. They would all pay. She focused her thoughts back on the book. It claimed that a priestess should be able to influence things beyond herself. Kiri had found she was able to sense the thoughts of others, even sense their bodies, and, against their wishes, cause spasms and movements. That was how she'd escaped from Torrin and the other Scarlians. One man had slit his throat at her bidding. Had she been quick enough, she might have dealt with Torrin there and then. It required fierce concentration. She knew that most priestesses couldn't do this, even those who trained as warriors. What are my limits? What can I do? According to legend, the founder of the priestess's faith, Alina Drayden, had been able to strike people down at distance just by thinking of it. Myths told that she could command the elements, cause fires, move objects by the force of her thoughts. Kiri had seen no priestess do such things, but she thought she would try herself. The 6 elements spoke of powers being used to fight in war. A war Alina had won, despite what the stories indicated were the most terrifying and ingenious weapons ever wrought by men. War is surely coming. She had been trying to affect the cup of water for spells now. It sat obstinately in front of her, indifferent to her attempts. Something I'm missing. Or are the stories just that? There was a click from behind her. She turned, automatically pulling the felt glove over her left hand. The door to the practice hall opened. Kiri recognized High Priestess Nerina Helios, the leader of the priestesses now that old Lorna had died. Nerina was as pale-faced as ever. She was diminutive, but carried herself with an easy grace and confidence that radiated around her like a glow. It was she that had taken over from Charis, raising Kiri into the priestesshood and taking over her tutoring. Where Charis had been warm and affectionate, Nerina was cold and aloof, matter-of-fact and often dismissive. Kiri had felt safe with Charis, but with Nerina... Kiri shivered. She wasn't sure if it was with fear or excitement. Certainly Nerina had a lot to teach her. "I thought you might be here," Nerina said. As ever, her voice was faint, but somehow it was always audible, precise, and almost crystal-like in clarity. "I was trying something." Nerina walked slowly over to her. "So I see. Yet the secrets elude you?" Was there a tone of disappointment? It felt like a criticism, and it stung. Kiri let it pass. It was Nerina's way. Nerina picked up the cup and turned it around in her hand, inspecting it. Then she returned it carefully to the floor. "Is this not where you first learned to use your powers to their truest extent?" Kiri nodded. "I remember it well. I nearly broke my wrist." Nerina swept past her, her gown billowing as she moved. "A priestess has a gift, this you know. That gift can be trained, refined, and sharpened. But can it be increased?" Kiri shook her head. "No, I've tried. We have what gifts we're born with." "So you put my prowess down to mere luck?" Nerina asked. "I was born with the strongest gift seen in a generation? Is that what you believe? The same being true for all the high priestesses who have gone before? You've already reached your limits?" Her voice was mocking. Kiri frowned. "You're saying you found a way to strengthen your gift? Increase your powers? How?" "My secret," Nerina said. "I kept it for many rounds, waiting. Practicing in hiding, far from prying eyes. Knowing that one stretch it would be necessary." "Part of the 6th element?" Kiri asked. "But I don't remember." "I studied it for long hours," Nerina admitted. "The clues are there. Alina was able to command armies at great distances, control provinces, issue orders. She could smite people marks away, so the legends tell. How other than by the gift? Such a thing no priestess has done since her time, and those of us especially endowed by Lacaille." Kiri eagerly moved forward. "And you're saying she wasn't born with such a gift? She gained it? And you know how to do the same?" Nerina nodded. But how? Tell me. Nerina walked around her. Kiri was familiar with the habit now, and waited for the High Priestess to finish her steps. Do you remember one of the acolytes? Nerina asked. I believe her name was Saria. Yes. She had a gift, but I saw her later on, and it was as if someone... Kiri looked up, shocked, but finally realizing what had happened. You stole her gift. You took her power. Nerina held her gaze without answering. Kiri's eyes widened in recognition. It was you! In the choosing ceremony! I felt the Nexion. Saria, she was scared. You hurt her. She suffered no lasting harm. Her gift was too weak to be useful on its own, but combined with others... You've taken more gifts. From how many? Nerina licked her lips and smiled at Kiri. Many. An unpleasant thought flickered across Kiri's mind. Nerina clearly saw it etched on her face, and she laughed. Oh, I considered taking yours early on, Nerina said. But you were young and raw. I wanted to see how your gift would develop. Do not fear. You are far more useful to me as you are. She paused, turning on her heel, her gown sweeping out once more. But I would see you becoming more powerful. War is coming, this you know. I need those with the greatest gifts to be stronger still. Do you want me to do what you did to Saria? Kiri backed away, shaking her head. Steal another's gift? No. It is our survival that counts, Nerina said, advancing on Kiri. Make no mistake. There will be no mercy for us at the hands of our enemies. If we do not gain strength, we will be crushed. We are weak enough as it is. It's wrong. Kiri backed away. We shouldn't be. It's barbaric. I won't... You think you'll be able to avenge yourself upon Prince Torrin of Scarly without it? That stopped her. The mere mention of the man's name caused rage to flash and flare in her mind. Torrin. He who killed Charis. My strength is great enough for that. Pain erupted around her, squeezing in around her skull like a vice. She screamed, unable to blot it out no matter what she tried. She almost fell to the floor, unable to control her body. No, Kiri, it is not. The pain vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her staggering around, dizzy, her eyes blurred. You were lucky to escape last time, against a single-armed man, Nerina continued, as if nothing had happened. We will face far greater odds. If you do not have the strength, you will die in the attempt. If that is your wish. Nerina moved in close, grabbing Kiri around the neck. Kiri tried to retreat, but felt herself hoisted into the air. She yelled out in pain. Strength! I will take your gift myself this instant. No! Nerina dropped her. Kiri fell to the floor. Being a warrior is not for the faint-hearted, Nerina said, standing over her and staring down. Are you faint-hearted, Priestess Kiri? Or would you truly have your vengeance on the man that caused you hurt? Anger flared bright, anger at the humiliation, anger at her loss. Her left hand clenched. I would. You know I would. Nerina regarded her for a moment. You must be wary of men, Nerina said. Kiri blinked in surprise. Nerina had a strange habit of changing tack in a conversation. I'm always wary of men, Kiri answered back, confused. I hate them all. One tried to take me when I was young. That is not what I meant, Nerina continued. You have only dealt with the poor examples and ignoble refuse of their type. This Torrin you speak of is a powerful adversary from a royal line. He will be strong, of course, but he will be cunning too. Do not underestimate him. Kiri frowned. Men have no gift. We can overpower them easily enough. Nerina nodded. In most cases, yes. Yet it is possible to forge a link with a man which is not easily undone. Be careful who you open your mind to. Kiri shuddered. I would open my mind to no man. They're animals, and I treat them as such." Nerina nodded, and then gestured to her. "Then you should have no trouble. Get up. There is more you must learn." Kiri did so. Nerina must have somehow summoned the guards as the doors to the practice room opened on cue. 2 guards stood in the doorway, each holding a young girl between them. Kiri didn't recognize them, but knew who they were. Their clothing, plain and simple smocks, gave them away. They struggled to escape, but froze as they took in the sight of the 2 priestesses. "Girls that came from Scalia in the last hive, delivered by Torin himself, so I heard." Nerina signalled to the guards, and the girls were dragged forward, kicking and screaming. The guards threw them to their knees in front of Nerina. The one on the right spat at her, and a nearby guard hit her hard across the cheek. "These Scalians have the gift in some small measure," Nerina said, "useless in isolation, but when combined—" Kiri looked at Nerina in horror. "Observe," Nerina said. Nerina held out her hand, and the girl on the right froze, her expression going vacant. The other one screeched and tried to jolt the first girl out of the hypnotic effect, but the guard pulled her away. "Feel the Nexion. Take the mind and slow it." Kiri watched as Nerina moved closer, bending down and pushing her fingers against the first girl's face. The other girl shrieked and yelled, powerless to stop what was happening to her companion. "Touch, grasp, sense, and take." Kiri felt the Nexion twist and writhe unnaturally around her, a metallic taste, acrid and sharp. The girl's consciousness faintly swirled in her mind. Echoes of thoughts drifted past, ephemeral and out of comprehension. A vague horror, a realization of the inevitable, and then power. She heard Nerina sigh deeply. A sense of enrichment, revitalization, a hunger sated, the afterglow of desire satisfied. Kiri gasped, her body warming to the feeling. She felt a lust grow in her, coursing up her arms and thighs, her core thrilling to the sensation. She blinked. Nerina had stepped back. The girl she had been holding still knelt, her jaw slack, her eyes staring beyond the walls of the hall. She uttered no sound. "Now," Nerina said, "take the other one." The other girl immediately went into a frenzy, swearing and cursing, thrashing around in an attempt to get free, the guards struggling to hold her. Kiri hesitated. "Do it, or I take your own gift," Nerina said. "Make your choice, Priestess Kiri. It is time to face the realities of this world." Kiri swallowed, looking at Nerina and then into the terrified eyes of the girl before her. "She's a Scalian, the same people who killed Charis, the same, just as guilty, brought here by Torin himself. Take every advantage, show no mercy. I must live by this now. Nerina's right. It's the only way." Kiri's expression hardened, and she moved forward. "That's it. Now, slow the mind." Kiri reached out a trembling hand. She could feel the girl's emotions: fear, terror, hatred, anger. She wrapped herself around those feelings, moulding her own feelings to match them. Overwhelming peace, blanketing tranquility, a dreamy sense of acceptance. "Good. That's the way." The girl slowed her turmoil, going slack in the arms of the guard. "Now, touch." Kiri moved forward, her fingers reaching out. Her fingers ran over the girl's forehead, pushing her long hair aside. Warm skin, soft flesh. A tremble, blood pumping, breathing, life. The gift like a warm, comforting orb of heat within. The girl had a power, not so strong as hers for sure, but it was there, throbbing within her. "Grasp." Kiri reached further. It was as if her fingers were reaching inside the girl, past her cheeks, past her skull, into her very mind. This feels wrong. Dirty even. But somehow... For a brief moment there was a scream of fear, a pulse of horror, an awful sense of violation. But it was a shell of a response, quickly fading into nothing. Yes, good, Kiri. Now, take. Kiri reached further. The warmth was just ahead. She touched it. The girl's power flared brightly in counterpoint to her own. There was a connection. A flash of images flickered in Kiri's mind. A priestess in a cloak, men with weapons drawn clutching their heads, a city standing proud against a mountainside, a bright light flashing from the highest point. Lust flamed within her, burning up her extremities. Conscious thought drifted aside as desire took her. Nothing but reaching that heat mattered now. She greedily clutched at it. Exhilaration seized her. Heat and light bathed her being. Something within her rose out of control, a sensation beyond any comparison, spiralling upwards and then pounding outwards through her body, lighting every sense with ardour. She panicked for a moment, thinking to stop it, but it was far too late. She screamed with delight and passion, moaning loudly as the sensation ebbed. And then it was over. She was on her knees, her hands still outstretched, her body trembling in reaction. She was tingling all over, her breath coming in deep, ragged gasps. The power! She could feel it. She was stronger, more able. She could see, hear and taste everything so much the better. Her eyes focused. The girl before her was now the mirror of the other, open-mouthed and expressionless. As she watched, the girl keeled over in a faint. Kiri didn't care. I've never felt anything so. I want more. She looked up at Nerina. Out of the corner of her eye she could see the guards had backed away. Not so unpleasant, Nerina said, with an almost coquettish smile. More, Kiri said, her face still slack with lust. More, please. You will, Nerina said, in time. Come with me now. Urgent matters call. I have need of your experience in Vada. You will relate what happened when I ask for you. There was no time to reflect on the experience. Kiri was taken directly to the temple by Nerina. Stepping lightly on the rich carpets, she followed the high priestess down corridors brightly lit by enormous mirrors that reflected Lacaille's light throughout the interior. They came to the central hall. It was here that Kiri had been judged, not so long ago. Nerina had presided over the quisition. Kiri's life had hung in the balance. Only Nerina's deft political dance had saved her that stretch. The hall was as it had been before, the floor the same marbled checkerboard pattern she remembered, with alternating red and sand-coloured tiles. Metal oil burners were positioned, wrought to look like shades with their distinctive bowl-shaped cup at the top. Flames flickered from them, providing a warm orange glow. Kiri cast her eyes over to the priestesses' benches. Charis used to sit there. The other priestesses were already assembled. They stood as Nerina entered. Kiri expected the usual scowl from Priestess Mirren, and was not disappointed. The woman hated her. Hated her for usurping her daughter's position as Nerina's favourite. Hated her for having risen from the slums to be a priestess. Kiri would never be worthy in her eyes. Her daughter was a different matter. Rihanna had made Kiri's life a living hell ever since she'd arrived in the temple. But something had changed since the incident with Torin. There was a little respect there now. The taunting had stopped the moment Nerina had elevated her to a priestess, though they had not spoken since. Kiri made her way over to Tasha, who was the closest thing she had to a friend, She was a tall, dark-skinned woman, with her black hair tied on top of her head, the left side of her scalp shaven in the manner of the priestesses. Kiri had her hair trimmed in the same manner, though it remained long on the right, almost down to her waist. Tasha had once defended her against Rihanna. Kiri had not forgotten the kindness. Tasha acknowledged her with a faint nod. "It is good to see you again," Tasha said. Kiri marvelled at her soft voice. It seemed completely out of place with her impressive physique. She was strong and lithe, a deadly opponent, one whom Kiri had never been able to gain advantage over in their practices. Kiri thought her own voice sounded sharp and unpleasant in comparison. Tasha always seemed calm and unruffled. Kiri envied her. Nerina sat down in her customary position, behind a table set in the centre of the hall, and surveyed the other priestesses. Silence fell. "I bring this meeting to order," Nerina said. "A decision is now forced upon us. We are to reap what we have sown from past inaction. Our legacy of laziness and our attempts at peaceful coexistence have left us weak and exposed. I have beseeched Lacaille for wisdom in all these matters, as is our way." Kiri gasped at the direct approach Nerina took. She wasn't wrong, but to directly criticise Lorna and Charis so soon after... Kiri saw she wasn't alone. A few furtive glances were exchanged by the other priestesses. Nerina continued unfazed. "Amrit, your report." Kiri watched as one of the junior priestesses stepped forward and then turned to face everyone. Kiri recognised her as one of the flyers, priestesses who conveyed messages by flying on Dax across the skies of Drayden. They acted as reconnaissance too, keeping an eye on Drayden's borders. The young woman looked nervous, gazing around the hall briefly before beginning. "We have been patrolling the borders as directed," Amrit said, "paying particular attention to those in the Shadeward adjoining Scalia. We ensured a few riders returned to Varda, though little was left of the town after the fire. 2 stretches ago we were overflying the mountains and spied a cloud of smoke near the border town of Tyrande. We descended only to find—" The young woman's voice faltered for a moment. "It was razed, burnt to the ground. There were none left alive. All had been put to the sword." There was a gasp around the room. Tyrande was a border town, only 100 marks from Dane itself. "An army on our borders? So soon?" Mirren demanded. "No missive, no declaration, just a cowardly attack? First Varda, and now—" "We didn't destroy Varda. They brought that destruction upon themselves," Kiri added. Nerina raised her hand and demanded silence. "Can we confirm who was responsible?" Nerina asked. "It was the Scarlians for sure," Amrit answered. "We found some of their men amongst the dead. We flew to the mountain passes and found some of them heading back. Not a large force, but we saw the royal banners of the House of Tiamoy. We were spotted as we descended and came under attack. We had to turn aside. It was definitely them." "How many lived in Tyrande?" Nerina asked softly. "Over 2,000 of our people," Amrit replied. The priestesses looked at each other. Kiri saw some faces were etched with sadness, others with anger. Mirren broke the silence. "They mean not to attack Dane, then?" "No, that is not their plan," Nerina agreed. "Tyrande is a border town, much like Varda, of no real value. Varda was destroyed in our last encounter. I suspect they see this as a symbolic gesture on our soil. They are trying to entice us into a fight. It is a dare." "They want to draw us out," Tasha said. "We would be wise not to rise to provocation." "But if we make no response to Tyrande, then we look weak," Mirren answered. "The Scarlians aren't the only people who will be watching our response. If Talun and Kiriak see that we are unprepared to defend our own borders—" Nerina nodded. "We will be under attack from all sides before the pass is out." Kiri looked from one to the other. None spoke. "We cannot take on the Scarlians in the field of battle. We do not have the strength," Mirren said. "It would take a sustained campaign for us to force our way through their lands, fortifying as we went. A war would be long and costly even if it could be done. Victory would not be guaranteed. I don't understand how they could organize an attack so quickly, Kiri said. How did they have an army on our borders? Nerina turned to look at her. I'm afraid the answer is simple, Priestess Kiri, she said. They took advantage of our search to gauge our power. We sued for peace and revealed our weakness. They were already prepared to go to war, but lacked the necessary knowledge of our strength. In our desire for peace, we gave away that we were not prepared for a war. Now they seek to turn that to their advantage. We must stop them, Rihanna answered. Kiri looked at her, surprised to find herself in agreement with her rival of so long. And so we will, Nerina said with a nod. We will take the fight directly to them. We will make the Scarlians regret their boldness. By doing what? Mirin demanded. Nerina smiled at her and then turned to Amrit. How many flyers do we have? Nerina asked. Just shy of 50 here in Dane, High Priestess. Nerina turned to Mirin. And how many can we assemble within a quarter pass? Mirin shook her head. Perhaps 200, if we pull in those stationed across our lands. But why? Then I have lessons for you all, Nerina said, her voice rising slightly. Call for all priestesses that can ride in the temple piazza. Bring our weapons of war. We will take our fight directly into Scalia, and rain fire on them from upon high. The priestesses looked at her. Lacaille darkens, Nerina said. The black spots smite her surface as our elements foretell. Cold flame and fire will descend upon those she deems not worthy of her pleasure. Kiri, relate what you were told in Vada, when they slew Charis before your eyes. Nerina turned to Kiri expectantly. Kiri stepped forward and swallowed before speaking, trying to ease the dryness in her mouth. Before he had Charis, Fion and Myra killed, Kiri began, Prince Torrin of Scalia burnt the treaty between our peoples before us. He told us to take back this message, that Scalia would no longer be beholden to Drayden, that they would no longer pay the tithe, no longer allow the search. He denied Lacaille. Another gasp from the priestesses, accompanied by low mutterings of disapproval and shock. He called our beliefs false. They care not for the truth. Lacaille has judged them, Nerina added. The blackness will only grow until our work is done. Our duty is clear. Lacaille calls to us. The time has come to finish what was started long ago. Kiri could see the priestesses nodding around her. The Scarlians believe they are impregnable within their cities of stone and behind their walls, skilled in their arts of war with their primitive handheld weapons. They believe they can strike at us with impunity, that we are weak and craven. We shall show them the futility of their confidence. Nerina had everyone's attention. No one so much as drew a breath. They know not of what we can do when provoked. They have unleashed the anger of Lacaille herself. They will suffer her wrath. As Alina Drayden once did, we shall do once more. The will of Lacaille. The will of Lacaille! The priestesses took up the cry. Nerina looked across at Kiri as she joined in the chant. Your chance of vengeance comes sooner than you think.